Welcome to the Dr. Misha podcast, where we try to summarize famous and classical books in less than 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Today we are tackling Moby Dick.
Moby Dick.
Herman Melville's massive American novel.
Massive is, right? It's one of those books that people talk about having read more often than they actually have.
Right.
But you're in luck today. We're diving into its depths to extract those golden nuggets of meaning.
Okay, so first things first. For those who haven't been on a whaling ship lately, what is the basic plot of Moby Dick?
Well, we meet Ishmael, our narrator, who's drawn to the sea looking for something more in life.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up on the Pequod, this whaling ship, with a rather unique Captain Ahab.
Wait, unique how all sea captains are a little eccentric, right?
Ahab is next level.
Okay.
See, this whale, Moby Dick, took his leg on a previous voyage.
Oh.
And now Ahab is consumed by the need for revenge.
Wow.
It's less about whaling and more about this deeply personal vendetta.
So this white whale is more than just an animal to Ahab?
Yeah.
What do you think Moby Dick represents in the book?
Mm.
Is it as simple as just being the object of Ahab's rage?
Not at all. That's where Melville gets really clever.
Okay.
Moby Dick becomes this blank canvas for deeper meaning.
Right.
Some critics say he embodies nature's indifference to human suffering. Others see him as a symbol of God, powerful, unknowable.
Okay, so if Moby Dick is this symbol of something bigger, Ahab's obsession with him takes on a whole new dimension. It's like he's fighting fate or even God itself.
Exactly, and that's where the biblical parallels come in.
Right.
Melville deliberately names his characters after biblical figures: Ahab, Ishmael, Rachel.
Wow.
It adds this extra layer of meaning, almost like a prophecy hanging over the story.
Does Ahab's fate in the book mirror the biblical king Ahab's downfall then?
You could certainly interpret it that way.
Right.
The biblical Ahab led his people astray,
Uh-huh.
just as Captain Ahab leads his crew to destruction in his pursuit of the white whale.
So Melville is drawing on these ancient stories to say something about human nature itself.
Precisely. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, revenge, and the illusion of control over nature.
I'm already sensing some serious food for thought here, and we haven't even gotten to the chowder yet.
That's the beauty of Moby Dick.
Right.
It's a feast for the mind on so many levels.
Well, before we get too deep into the symbolism, let's meet some of the other players on this whaling vessel.
Okay.
Who are some of the standout characters besides Ahab and Ishmael?
There's Pequod, Ishmael's close friend, who is a skilled harpooner.
Okay.
Comes from a Polynesian island and brings this totally different worldview to the ship.
Right.
He and Ishmael form this unlikely bond, defying the prejudices of the time.
So even amidst this intense whale hunt, there's this message of friendship and finding common ground.
Absolutely. And then there's Starbuck, the first mate. He's the voice of reason, constantly trying to rein in Ahab's obsession and keep the crew focused on, actual whaling.
Right, because at the end of the day, this is still a business. They're not just out there for philosophical debates. But that raises an interesting question. How accurate is Melville's depiction of the whaling industry?
That's where his personal experience comes in.
Oh.
Melville actually worked on whaling ships, so he knew the ropes, so to speak.
So all those detailed descriptions of the hunt, the tools, the anatomy of whales, that's all based on first-hand knowledge.
You got it. He even dives deep into the economics of whaling,
Right.
The different types of whale oil, the whole process. He doesn't shy away from the gory details either.
It's like a history lesson and a thriller rolled into one.
Exactly. And that realism makes the story even more impactful.
Yeah.
You're right there on deck with them feeling the danger, the grit, and the sheer awe of encountering these massive creatures.
I can almost smell the salt air and hear the creaking of the ship.
Melville's writing can be incredibly evocative.
Right.
He doesn't just tell the story, he immerses you in it.
That makes me want to grab a copy of Moby Dick right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly much more than just an adventure story.
Oh, much more. It's an exploration of humanity's relationship with nature, the consequences of obsession, and the eternal search for meaning.
Wow.
All wrapped up in this epic seafaring tale.
We've been talking about the darker aspects of the book, but one thing that surprised me was the humor. I mean, there are moments in Moby Dick that are genuinely funny.
Right, Melville had a sharp wit, and he wasn't afraid to use it. Think about those early scenes with Pequod.
Yeah.
The crew is terrified of him at first, thinking he's some kind of savage.
And then he turns out to be this incredibly loyal and kind-hearted person.
Yeah.
The way they portray those cultural misunderstandings is hilarious.
It's a reminder that humor can exist even in the most unlikely places. Even in the face of danger and obsession, there are these moments of lightness and laughter.
Speaking of obsession, one detail that really stuck with me was that coffin Pequod builds for himself when he thinks he's dying. Talk about foreshadowing.
It's such a powerful symbol, right? And the irony of it ending up saving Ishmael's life at the end. It makes you think about fate and the unexpected twists and turns life can take.
It's like that saying, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. But in this case, it's more like life is what happens when you're busy building your own coffin.
Exactly. And that's just one example of how Melville uses seemingly ordinary objects to represent these larger ideas. The Pequod itself can be seen as a symbol.
For what? Humanity's journey through life, the relentless pursuit of goals.
Maybe both. It's this microcosm of society with all its different personalities and motivations. You've got Ahab, driven by his obsession, Starbuck trying to maintain order, and Ishmael somewhere in between observing it all.
And ultimately, the ship is destroyed by Ahab's single-minded pursuit of Moby Dick. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when we let our passions consume us.
And when we fail to heed the warnings of those who try to guide us toward a safer course. Remember, Starbuck tries to convince Ahab to give up the chase, but Ahab refuses to listen.
Which brings us back to that theme of man versus nature. Ahab thinks he can conquer Moby Dick, but he underestimates the power of the natural world.
Ahab's downfall is a reminder that we are not the masters of the universe. There are forces beyond our control, and we ignore them at our peril.
And that's a message that resonates even today, especially when you think about climate change and our impact on the planet.
Melville was writing in the 19th century, but his insights about the human condition, our ambitions, and our relationship with nature are timeless.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the symbolism and the big ideas, but one thing I really appreciate about Moby Dick is the language itself. Melville's writing is so rich and evocative.
Absolutely. He uses these incredible metaphors and descriptions that just pull you into the story. It's not always the easiest read, but it's definitely rewarding.
Do you have a favorite passage that comes to mind?
There are so many to choose from, but I always love the opening line, "Call me Ishmael." It's so simple, yet so powerful. It immediately draws you in and makes you want to know more about this character.
It's like he's inviting you on this journey with him. And what a journey it is.
Full of adventure, danger, and profound insights.
Okay, so we've talked about the plot, the characters, the themes, the humor. Is there anything else about Moby Dick that we absolutely have to touch on before we wrap up?
One thing that often gets overlooked is the structure of the book. It's not a straightforward, linear narrative. Melville jumps around in time. He includes these chapters that are like essays on whaling. He even has sections that read like Shakespearean plays.
Right. It's like he's trying to capture the vastness and complexity of the ocean itself in the structure of the novel.
Exactly. It's challenging, but it's also part of what makes Moby Dick so unique and unforgettable.
You've definitely convinced me that this is a book worth revisiting or reading for the first time if you haven't already.
I think you'll find it's an experience that stays with you long after you've finished the last page.
Before we move on, I just want to remind everyone that the information for today's deep dive came from Moby Dick, A Voyage of Tribulation, Beauty, and Madness, and Moby Dick. Full book summary spark notes. Both are excellent resources if you want to learn more.
And I would add that there are countless other interpretations and analyses of Moby Dick out there. It's a book that continues to fascinate and inspire readers centuries after it was written.
You know, when I think of classic literature, I don't usually think laugh out loud funny. But Moby Dick really surprised me with its humor.
It's true. Melville had a knack for finding humor in unexpected places. Like, remember that scene where the Pequod encounters another ship and the captains are shouting greetings to each other across the waves?
Oh, right. They're trying to be all formal and polite, but they're also desperately trying to figure out if the other ship has spotted any whales they can steal.
Exactly. It's this absurd mix of social decorum and cutthroat competition. And Melville describes it with such a dry wit that you can't help but chuckle.
It's like he's poking fun at the whole idea of whaling as this grand and noble profession.
And let's not forget the Tryworks chapter, where Ishmael describes the process of boiling down whale blubber.
Oh, yeah.
It's gruesome and fascinating at the same time.
The way he talks about the flames and the stench and the oily mess, it's almost poetic, but also kind of hilarious.
Right. It's like he's turning this mundane task into a scene from Dante's Inferno. But then he throws in these little asides about the chowder they make from the scraps of whale meat.
Which, by the way, sounds absolutely disgusting.
Oh, completely inedible. But the way Melville describes it with a mix of disgust and fascination, it's just pure comedic gold.
It's those little moments of humor that keep the book from feeling too heavy or overwhelming.
Exactly. They provide a much-needed break from the intensity of the whale hunt and the philosophical musings.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot today, But before we wrap up this deep dive into Moby Dick, is there anything else you think our listeners should keep in mind as they embark on their own voyages with this book?
I think the most important thing is to be open to the experience. Moby Dick is not a passive read.
Right.
It demands your attention, your engagement, and your willingness to wrestle with big ideas.
It's a book that rewards multiple readings, that's for sure. Each time you go back, you discover something new.
And don't be afraid to get lost in the language. Melville's prose is rich and complex, but it's also incredibly beautiful and rewarding. Take your time, savor the words, and let yourself be transported to another time and place.
Well said. I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on today. I'm certainly feeling inspired to revisit Moby Dick with fresh eyes.
Me too. It's a book that never ceases to amaze me.
All right, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Moby Dick for today. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Please share this deep dive among your friends and family to spread the knowledge, and let me know in the comments which books you would like to see summarized in the future. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Misha Podcast.